We are live. Yay. Good morning. This is Ruth L. Snyder joining you from Bonnieville, and I'm happy to have Tracy Krauss joining me from.
Tumbler Ridge. Sorry, you're waiting for me to say it. Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. There we go.
We have had some technical difficulties this morning. We were going to start at 10 o'clock, but we are still here. And I said to Tracy, maybe we are experiencing opposition because we're doing something we need to be doing. So
Exactly.
Thanks for your patience, Tracy.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you for having me here today. I mean, it's a privilege for sure. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your background, how you got interested in writing, how you got started, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh my, I'll try not to make it too long. So I have been writing for, 30, actually it'll be 36 years because my eldest daughter's turning 36 this summer, and I started writing when she was a baby. So prior to that, I still am a visual artist, and that's what I got my degree in and things. So I used to do a lot of art, but I found that as a young mom, it was really difficult living in a tiny little place that we did to get out all the art supplies every day, and you just get started, and then you'd have to clean up because this same table was also used for meals and all that stuff. So I don't know where I'm not quite sure why I got the idea to write. I mean, I always loved writing, even in school and in that. So my mom lent me her typewriter because, of course, this was back in the 80s, and so then I started writing. So when she was napping, I was writing, and I just kind of became this closet writer for a lot of years, where I wrote every day. In the afternoons, usually when the kids were sleeping, or even when they were older, it's like, no, now it's mom's quiet time, go play, or whatever it was. Yeah, and that's where it all started. It's so a long time ago. I can credit my daughter for getting me started, although her crying and things maybe wasn't as inspirational as it could have been. But yeah, I mean, that's really where it began, and it was a lot of years, however, before I had the nerve to share it with anybody. And then once I did start sharing with people, and then also trying to submit my work, that was another long, 10-year process of learning and rejection. And but it's been a really great ride. So I don't know. There we go.
Let's go back a little bit to, you said it took you a while before you could share your writing with anybody. So I think that's a fear that a lot of writers have, because our writing is so personal, and rejection is hard. So who did you first share with, and how did you get the courage to share with more people?
Okay. Well, yeah, I've been writing, like I say, I started, and it was about 16 years. My first novel was in the making. And I'm not sure why that's such a fear, but it was gripping, like, people, oh, you're writing a book, you should let me read it. And it was like, no, it's just so personal. And it is really frightening to think that you're going to share, and then I don't know what you think is going to happen. Is the sky going to fall or what? But I finally shared with my daughter, not the same one, a different daughter who was an avid reader, and she was about 14 at the time, and she loved to read every Jeanette Oak book and Francine Rivers and all those and whatever. So I thought, well, I'll get her to read because she has a pretty good background in reading, Christian romance. And her reaction after she read it was, well, it's okay. And I was like, what? I thought she was going to go, oh, Mom, this is so wonderful. You need, whatever. But then she actually was mature enough, I guess, to point out the things that she didn't like. And it was huge. So even though it was a family member, it was a teenage girl. That was a huge step. And so then I went back in, and it just opened up my mind to the fact that, I couldn't see the forest for the trees, to use an old cliche. I just didn't see the things until she pointed them out. And then suddenly so many other things. So that was the first sharing. And then after that, I did start searching online for places to submit your work. And I can't remember the name of the place now. I mean, this was back in the early to mid 2000s, I guess, where you could submit a manuscript and for a critique. And so I did that, and I got critiques back, which were really brutal, if I can put it that way. And again, the initial reaction is almost, I guess, like that, like you're really, really hurt. And sort of like, and then next sort of comes this sense of anger, and you're indignant. Well, what do they know anyway? They're not understanding what I'm trying to say. But eventually you go through the whole gamut of emotion where then you realize, oh, actually, these people do know what they're talking about. This is what they do for a living, and they're right. Who knew, So it was a long process of, at least, I'm going to say, 8 years of, from the first time my daughter read the first manuscript and me just continuing to submit to these kind of places. Until I actually found somebody who wanted to publish a book. But it was a lot of pain and a lot of rejection, in the interim. But you do get thick skin, and you do get tougher. And then after those first few ones where you're very hurt, then after that, it's more like you're looking for, okay, what's this person going to say this time? So now, I mean, I of course, rejection always hurts, and negative reviews always hurt. I'm not going to lie and say they don't, but I really try to look at every bit of feedback I get as a learning opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have people read your manuscript, what specific questions, I mean, I'm assuming you ask for specific feedback when you have beta readers. What kind of feedback do you ask them for?
Do you mean now or then?
Now.
Yeah. I mean, now what I'm looking for is less about writing style and grammar and those kind of things. I mean, in the early days, there was a lot of, I didn't understand the idea of point of view head hopping, so I'd have multiple points of view. And interestingly, like lots of classic literature is written that way, so it's not necessarily that it's wrong, but it's just not what's currently acceptable. And then the whole, active versus passive voice, and what else, too many adverbs and those kind of things. So sorry, I'm actually not answering your question. I'm saying those are the things that kind of jumped out at me first. And hey, you know what? It doesn't matter how long you've been writing. You can always use a little polish up, those kind of grammar things. Sure, you can get programs like Grammarly or whatever to help you. But at the end of the day, when somebody reads and they point out something like that, I always really appreciate it. I think today, though, mostly I'm looking for bigger picture things, like more the emotional believability, I guess, and whether whether the character's journey is appropriate, I guess. It's more, I'm looking more for big picture edits. And then lots of my beta readers also point out grammar and spelling errors and things, which I also appreciate. But those are things that an editor or, copy editor or whoever is going to find.
Right.
But I like the big picture stuff. And I have a really lovely group of beta readers, but I have to say I have another daughter, because I have 3 daughters. So daughter number 3, if she ever watches this, she's getting the credit. She's my favorite beta reader because she is brutal. And she, some people say, oh, like she feels like she's hurting my feelings. But now after, 11 novels, I say to her, no, I want you to read this one and tell me exactly what you think. And she's the one who will really lay it on the line and point out things that I wouldn't have noticed.
Mm.
So, especially in terms of current culture and things like that,
Mhm.
because hey, I'm almost 60, not quite. I'm only 58, but so some things I don't see that she does. So, yeah.
That's great that you have a built-in beta reader group in your family.
Yeah. 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 It is good. I appreciate it.
So you were traditionally published first. Tell us a little bit about that part of your journey.
Um, so as I said, I was I've been doing a lot of submitting, and I had by the time that was in 2008. I had 4 books finished by that time, like 4 complete manuscripts, and I was on a leave from my regular job as a teacher for a few months due to medical reasons. I was having eye issues at the time, and so I decided, this is a perfect opportunity to really dig in and start submitting. So I think at the time, what was the name? There was a book called Sally. No, I forget. I don't know. Anyways, it was a big deal. Everybody went there, and that's where you look for agents and things like that. And I submitted over 100 um, submissions to agents and publishing companies, um, 30 for each book. So 120 submissions. And, each submission has to be tailored for that thing. So, it was good that I was off work. So I kind of made that my job for those months. And I, had to, it probably cost me $500 in postage, I'm sure, because at that time, you were still mostly sending through the mail. So you'd have to photocopy that manuscript, send it in the mail and that. But it was through that process I ended up with 3. So out of 120, a lot of them I never heard a thing. Few I got a nice form letter saying thank you, but this isn't what we're looking for at this time. And I got a few that gave feedback, which is so valuable. I love that. And then I actually had 3 offers. So that was cool. So it was like I thought that I had, this was this was going to be it. And somehow, so my first book was called And the Beat Goes On, which in hindsight is a terrible name. It's a terrible name. And I republished it so that contract ran out in 7. It was a 7-year deal. But it was with they were called Strategic Publishing, no, Strategic Book Publishing. But it was a totally traditional deal in that I didn't pay anything. Like they took me on, they did everything, and then I received the royalties on the book. And that book is like I said, I republished it under a different name, Conspiracy of Bones, which is to me a little bit more what the book's about. So it's a scientist, an archaeologist actually, who discovers human remains along with dinosaur remains. And so it has a thread of, that sort of an evolutionary conspiracy behind it or whatever. So it's a bit of a mystery thriller, but it also has a little bit of romance. And I still love that book. I mean, it wasn't the first book I wrote, but it was the first book to get published. And that was so exciting. And I thought that was all I needed to do. I was ready to quit my job and I was going to be rich. And that didn't happen.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because unfortunately that is a common belief. Oh, I just need to write a really good book and everything else will be, it'll just take care of itself. Sometimes people don't share the behind the scenes that, writing the book sometimes is the easiest part of the journey. And getting it into the hands of readers and growing your audience is actually the hard part of the journey.
So true. Like I was so naive and I, after all I'd been through with all the submitting and that whole learning curve about, publishing work and submitting. But then suddenly I had this wonderful book deal, and, it was back and forth for a good, 8 months at least, with various edits and all the, signing off and whatever and whatever. Like, it was quite the process and quite a learning curve for me. But the thing that I didn't understand at the time was that, like, I had nothing as far as a platform or an online presence. Shock, I wasn't even on Facebook. Like, I didn't have anything. I wasn't doing anything. And then suddenly they're telling me, now, you need to be doing these things, and they're trying to help you in terms of publicity. But when you don't know anything and you've never been on any kind of online platform and you didn't actually care about that ever, this was huge. Like, it was mind blowing. And so then that was a whole other learning curve, which was huge, probably bigger than anything else, is suddenly learning that, oh, you mean I have to promote this thing? Like, I thought that was your job, and I was just expecting that suddenly it was going to sell, and I was going to, like I say, like, that was all I needed to do. I didn't realize. And even then in 2008, things were moving in that direction where authors were expected to do a lot of their own things. Gone were the days of some, publicity agents setting up a cross-country tour for you at expenses paid or something, like, that wasn't happening. So that was really difficult. And that was probably the most difficult thing about the whole process. But I just rolled with the punches, so to speak, and made a lot of mistakes, and here we are. Here we are talking to one another.
You had quite a few pieces and books. You published some plays and some books, and anything else that you published traditionally?
So there were 3 books, or no, not 3 books. Yeah, 3 books with that particular company, but the next one, they offered me a deal, but it was more like a vanity type deal where I had to pay some money up front. But then as my day job, I was a teacher, and one of my specialties was drama. So I taught drama for 20 years. And that became, I was very passionate about that. And one of the things that I used to do, or I often did, was write plays for my students, because, despite the fact that there are thousands of plays out there, somehow they just didn't fit, So I was writing plays for my students for quite a number of years. But then once I started into this whole process of submitting and that, I started thinking, I've got this whole catalog of plays that, I wonder if I could find places to submit those. So then I started researching that and started submitting plays. And again, that isn't an easy process, but it's a little bit different than fiction or novels, in that most play publishers will accept manuscript, or will accept the script without an agent. So, but again, like, I'd submit to 10 or 15 different publishers and I'd get lots of rejections and whatnot. But that, fortunately for me, has turned out quite well. So I do have currently, is it 9 plays? Yeah, that are published. So I kind of started after I got that first book deal, I started investigating other ways of getting my writing out there. So plays have become very important in terms of my writer income, because I actually make money, although not in 2020 because nobody was going to the theater. But prior to that, probably 80% of my author income was through my plays, and they're all traditional. So I have not tried to self-publish any plays, and it's a high school market, obviously. So, the people that have my plays with, they know their target and they do all the advertising. So that's really nice for me. Like, I don't actually do much promotion in terms of my plays, but then in terms of the books, so gosh, fast forward a few years after that first book came out, and then I started thinking, maybe I'd like to get an agent. So I went through that process of submitting. I think it was Wind Over Marshdale at the time was the book. There was the manuscript that I was shopping around to agents, and then I actually did get an agent. His name was Steve Hudson, and he's a very nice man, and we're still friends. Yeah, so he was my agent for a few years, and he actually got me a deal for Wind Over Marshdale with a small publishing house, and that book is still with them, because even though the rights, it's been enough years now that I could, get the rights back to that and self-publish it, I don't really feel like I want to do that, because they're still really good to me. And and there is some advantage to having your work with a traditional publisher, because they do have more, they do have an audience already built, and they have clout in certain areas. So for me, being sort of that hybrid has worked out well, where I have some traditional, and then, as I said, I've started republishing some of my other work. Yeah.
So for those that don't understand who an agent is and what they do, could you just give a brief summary?
Yeah, so an agent is like your golden ticket or your key card into certain larger traditional publishing houses. So any of the really big publishers, like Zondervan or whatever, like any of the big ones, they're not going to look at you without an agent. So an agent represents you to those publishing houses. So with an agent, you agree that he or she will take on each individual, at least in my case, it wasn't just me, but it was each individual project. He would decide whether he wanted to take it on or not. And then it's up to him to basically shop that around to all the publishers that he would know. But of course, he gets a percentage, right? So if he gets you a good deal, it's to his advantage to find you a good deal where your royalties are higher and things, because then he gets a percentage of that. So, you're sharing the wealth, so to speak, with your agent, but he or she has a lot of, contacts, I guess, and inroads to places where, as a self-publisher or an independent, you just don't have. Like, those doors are shut unless you have an agent.
Like an extra layer of.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's like an extra layer of building connections, right? Because they have connections that they've built over years, and that's how they get your manuscript in front of editors. So.
Yes, exactly. So, it's a really good thing in that regard. The thing that I didn't like about being involved in the traditional way was there isn't as much autonomy. Like here's the cover, or maybe like, here's 3 choices. What do you think? Even in the case of one of my plays, it's called, right now, it's still my best-selling play. It's a silly little play called Ebenezer's Christmas Carol, and it's a spoof. It's a comedy spoof on, of course, Dickens. And in my mind, it's like, there's got to be thousands of this same play, but it actually sells really well normally. But that play, the real title was Ebenezer's Epiphany. That was the title that I gave it, Ebenezer's Epiphany, because he has the epiphany, right? And they're like, nope, that's not going to sell. We need to call it Ebenezer's Christmas Carol. And I was like, lame. Like, what kind of a lame name is that? Well, guess what? They actually knew what they were doing, because for some reason, I guess maybe with keywords and searches and things, people are still finding that silly play and performing it. It's, prior to COVID, it usually was performed at least 50 times a year, and it was published in 2010. So, I don't know. So sometimes they do know best. but you're limited in some of your decisions. Like you probably more than that though is the pricing and the ability to give away books and things, get in on some of those kind of things that indie authors often do, book giveaways and stuff. And you can't just give away too many or change the price. I found like with some of my ebooks, they were priced at $9.99, and to me that was a stupid price. But the publisher was like, nope, that's all of our ebooks in our whole catalog are priced at $9.99. So sorry. And I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Nothing. So having the ability to do those things is kind of nice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have to decide what is more important to you, I guess, is having the support and the contacts that a big publisher has. Is it important to you to make the New York Times bestseller list, or are you just concerned about getting your work out there and learning as you go? So,
yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like, there isn't any right answer. And that's, that sounds very convenient for me to say, because maybe some people are like, I want to know the best way. Well, guess what? There isn't a best way. Like, there are people doing very well with traditional publishers, even if they're not hitting a New York Times bestseller list or whatever, but yet they're still, and they have that support of their publisher and all those things. And it's working out really well for them. And then there are others who are, jumping into the self-publishing and the indie publishing, and they're doing really well for themselves too. And a lot of it is their own tenacity and legwork. But there's more than one way to do it. And I think there was a lot of stigma for being self-published for quite a while. And I think some of that came from, well, let's divide it down even further. There's like the vanity publishing or the fee for service type, where you're paying them, and some of them are not very reputable. I mean, I know there are many reputable companies that still want to make sure that your product, that your book is the best it can be. So they force you to, go through a lot of edits, and maybe you pay extra for that. But there are companies out there who don't care. Like, they'll just take your money and publish it as is. And oftentimes those are not very good quality. But then, there are people publishing for themselves on KDP or wherever, and they're not always that good quality either. So it really comes down to, I guess, as authors, we have to take ownership of the quality of our work as well nowadays. Like, you can't let that slide, and you can't expect somebody else to do it for you. You really have to be in charge of what you want people to see of your work. So,
yes, that's very true. And I think you bring up a really good point. If somebody pulls two books off a shelf, one indie and one traditionally published, they shouldn't be able to look at the cover or look inside and see noticeable differences. It should be good quality. And if it's not, then we're just hurting ourselves.
Yes, because at the end of the day, like, readers don't really care. I don't think they don't care, or they're not investigating, oh, who published this? Are they, maybe, I think if you're a reader and an author, maybe you are, right? Because like, author readers tend to be more looking at those kind of details. But the general person who's just reading and not also writing books, they're just interested in the story, right? And then, but like you say, there is a certain amount of professionalism, the way it's published, the way it's formatted, all those things that subconsciously they're probably noticing, and you want, like you said, you want your book, when you compare it to one that comes from a larger publishing house, to look at them and say, these are equal in quality. And then you let the reader decide on the story, whether they like it or not. So, and I think things have changed so much. I mean, that we've both been doing this for a while now, and boy, when I think back to when my first book came out in 2008 and now, and I think, oh, if I would have been on the right bandwagon then, doing some of the self-publishing things back then, I could probably have done better for myself, but I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I just wasn't ready. So I have to be, I am happy with the journey that I've been on, because my journey as an author isn't the same as yours or anybody else's. And I think sometimes when we compare ourselves or see what somebody else is doing, and sometimes there's that FOMO, I'm missing out. Oh, here's the new next thing. And you can't necessarily do it all. So you just have to sometimes take a breath and continue on with what you're doing. So
that's so true. Yeah, there's lots that we could be doing, but we are only one person and only have so much time and energy. So we have to do what we can do best and leave the results in God's hand. And how has faith influenced your journey?
It's everything. I'm not quite sure how else to say it. Yeah, so my writing started with fiction, and I love writing fiction, and I feel like that's still my primary passion, is to write fiction. But I realized early on that that because my faith and is so important, that has to be part of my fiction too, even if it's in a subtle way. But my characters are, either they're Christians already, or they'll come to Christ in my books, or they're going through some difficult thing where they need the love of God to help them through. So I mean, it's everything. It's just everything. And I would say I did not really consider myself a nonfiction writer, although I've done a couple of other projects over the years, except recently now I've been writing, it's out now, is a devotional series based on the Jewish calendar. So that was, and that was through an experience I had, one of my own, a sort of a life-changing experience I had a few years ago. Partly related to health and other things. But yeah, I can't quite separate. I don't separate the two. And then, okay, I just said that, and now that's not true, because my plays are not Christian. They're just silly, generic, secular plays for high school audiences. But the rest of my writing is it always has a Christian theme running through. Yeah.
So any advice you would give to somebody who's just starting on their writing or publishing journey?
I think it's about your passion, right? That's a hard question to answer, because if you don't have the passion and the sense that this is a calling, because I feel for myself that writing is a calling. So a lot of sort of similar to being in ministry of any kind, and my husband and I have been in ministry as well as pastors. It's a calling, just like being a missionary or a teacher or anything. So if you don't feel that, and if it's too hard and you actually don't like what you're doing, then I'm not sure, like, don't do it for the money, because chances are that's not going to pan out. It's not an easy way to make money. It's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of commitment. So I guess that's the thing, right? Like, if you have the passion and the drive and you feel like it's a calling, then you're gonna persevere, right? And that's what it takes, is just persevering, moving forward, not getting bogged down by rejection and whatever. Because if you know in your own heart this is what you're supposed to do, then that's hopefully going to get you through the difficult times, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Tracy. How can people learn more about your books and what you do?
Well, the best place is my website, because then that connects to everything else. I'm on all kinds of social media and that. And my books are available wide, so on Amazon, but also, through Kobo and paperbacks, hardcovers, ebooks, whatever. So the best place to find everything is my website, and that is simply tracykrauss.com. But I have to say, there is no E in Tracy, and there are 2 S's in Krauss, because my name can be spelled 10 different ways, so it's TracyKrauss. So there you go, tracykrauss.com.
All right, and I'm going to put that in the comments so that people can find it easily. Any last words that you want to leave us with?
I don't know. I just thank you for having me. And, you and I have been friends for 10 years at least or something. So this was really lovely. And, just, I don't know, what are my last words? Just continue to fight the good fight. That's about it.
Yes, we all need to be faithful to the calling that God gives us, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you bet.
Well, thanks for taking the time to do the interview and for sharing your journey and your love for God and love for writing. And we can maybe connect again if you have a new project that comes on the horizon.
Okay, sounds good. Take care.
You too.